Hello there, I just want to do a brief video for you to assist you in overcoming obstacles when you're learning to drive. It would be lovely to think that it's just going to be a smooth journey where nothing's going to, no problems occur, but it's unusual for that to happen. There's normally little gremlins or little things that crop up which need dealing with. I want to sort of just talk about that briefly. The things I'm talking about here are where you're I've mentioned previously where the idea is to build on previous learning. So I've talked about this in other videos. You're learning, and then you're building on that learning, and then you're building on that learning. So your experience is increasing, and your learning is getting more and more. So there's progress being made, and that's great. And also it is reflecting on what your previous experience is. If we don't think about this, then we can be quite disappointed as learners, because if we're not thinking to ourselves, well, I've got no previous experience whatsoever of ever sitting in this seat, then and yet you've got these very high expectations, then you're not getting things into context. So that's the first kind of thing to say to you. But the sort of obstacles I'm talking about are not so much to do with the obstacles of the coordination, because that does naturally come. I'm talking about the things where you're making decisions. Either you're driving too fast, so you're speeding, you're going over the maximum speed limit, you're driving too slowly, your position is incorrect for either on the road, or the junction. Your position is wrong. You're not doing any mirror checks, or if you are doing mirror checks, they're very hit and miss. No blind spot checks. In other words, bearing in mind when you're sort of learning to drive from scratch, if you come onto the Big Tom intensive driving course and you've done no driving whatsoever, it's not as if you've got any bad habits that need ironing out. I mean, if you're driving over 30 miles an hour, if you're doing 33 or 35 in a 30 and you've never driven before, then that's nothing to do with habit forming. I mean, that's just whether this is conscious or not. You're actually driving, you're making that decision, aren't you? And it's understanding why. That's really the key point with this. Understanding why your driving behaviour is as it is. Because one thing is for sure, be under no illusions with this, is that your driving instructor, the concepts, the ideas, the techniques, these are all, they're not making these up, the driving instructors. These are techniques and skills which are going to assist you to be a safe driver, and these have been in place for decades. It's not like we're in school here and someone's asking you for your opinion of whether you think a blind spot check, or whether it's wise or not to be aware of what's around you, or this is stuff that's been going on for decades, and these are known, recognised, complying techniques that comply with the driving standard. A driving instructor works to the driving standard, the DVSA driving standard, and you then go and get tested by an examiner who is working to the same standard. So you have that consistency throughout. So if you're learning to drive and you're getting frustrated because obstacles are cropping up where I'm driving too fast, or I'm driving in a certain place in the road, in the incorrect place in the road, and your driving instructor has made you aware of these things, and you're working together to try and to deal with these things. But if you're still doing 35 in a 30, that's happening for a reason. That's the thing I want to say in this video. It's not by chance. If you're repeatedly doing 35 in a 30, or even if you're doing, say, 40 in a 60, and the driving conditions are good, and you're doing 40 in a 60, that is happening for a particular reason. And it would be in your interest to try and understand what that reason is, what it is that's making you drive in any particular given way. It would be in your interest. The driving instructor can't second guess why that is. It would be in your interest to dig deep. On the intensive driving course that I do, you're given plenty of opportunity to reflect on these things, because if you're not thinking, you're not learning. So a chap a couple of weeks ago, I put it on the blog actually, you know, he was really doing fabulous reflection, because he wasn't just using his book, the Big Tom book, but also he was emailing me in the morning. He was doing it as soon as he got up. He said, that's the time, Tom, in my mind I can think about these things, and that's when it's good for me to actually be reflecting first thing in the morning. And he was emailing me a big old email, and it was talking about all these things, about what he was doing, how he's getting on, his strengths, his weaknesses, why he was doing what he was doing. And he was really, I couldn't have ever said why those reasons were. It was purely down to him really thinking about him. So there are many influences on your driving behaviour. Please don't think that this video is trying to come across in a critical way, a judgmental way. People drive the way they drive for reasons. It may be to do with things like a lack of theory knowledge. It might be to do with the influence of friends or family, role models and how they drive. It might have something to do with a previous traumatic experience that you had as a younger in your earlier years as a passenger in a vehicle. You might be under some kind of pressure from peers about you know, how quickly things happen. That can affect your behaviour. You may not believe your driving instructor. You may not trust him or her. You may not actually particularly like the person, and therefore you're not really listening to what's been going on. You might have this impression that what the driving instructor is saying is, well, it's kind of like debatable in some way. You know, it's open to debate. You know, blind spot checks, mirror checks, you know, this is all open to debate. And you might be used to perhaps coming from a school environment or college environment where previously teachers have been encouraging you to express your opinion on these things. And now you're thinking, as you're going into learning to drive, that the examiners are also going to be encouraging you to sort of, you know, do what you want to do because you've got your reasons behind it. But we are talking about road safety. We're talking about techniques and skills that are important to be able to use habitually, you know, continually, long term, for very, very good reason, and that's to maintain safety. All the evidence is suggesting right now that you can't get insurance, you just can't get insurance, cheap car insurance, without having a black box telematics in your car, which is a shame, because what that is indicating is that people just are going through this process of learning to drive without having the necessary skills and techniques. So I'd really, really encourage you to take this on board, and rather than fighting the situation, it's just really start internally looking and thinking to yourself, how can you improve? Hope that helps anyway.